Good evening, universe. Tonight I'm going to be talking about all of the standalone fantasy books that I read this year. I usually read series, so this year I had kind of a little challenge to myself to read more as standalones. I don't think that was included in my challenge for the year type thing because it's kind of nebulous. But I really did want to try reading a couple more standalones, and I succeeded in doing so. I checked a couple out, and now I'm going to tell you about them. First up is Ash by Malinda Lo. This is a sapphic Cinderella retelling. It's YA, and it's told in a kind of fairy tale sort of style. It has that very classic sort of fairy tale voice, and similarly classic pacing. So basically what it's about is Ash, a young girl who, of course, becomes orphaned, just like in the original Cinderella, and she's stuck with her two stepsisters and her stepmom. Honestly, I don't remember this very well. It was definitely read closer to the beginning of this year, but it was one that I remember really enjoying. I liked how just whimsical and light it felt. It really felt like I was in the story, and I liked the feeling that it gave me more than I liked the actual events that occurred. So I think the writing style was really good and it's really immersive, but I don't remember the exact points of the story. It does deviate from the Cinderella story a little bit, obviously, because like I said, it is a sapphic retelling, so it is going to be a little bit different. There is a prince in it, so it's not that the prince has been subbed out for a princess. It's that the story takes a slightly different angle. There's also a bunch of fae in it, so if you are interested in fae stories, this would be a good one. And overall, I really liked the treatment of the family. I felt that they were a little bit more, I understood them a little bit more than I usually do in the horrible step family trope. I felt like this one was a little bit more, not reasonable, but I understood them a little bit better. I definitely had a good time with this one, and I would recommend it to anybody who likes retellings or is looking for a new sapphic read. Next, I read The Night Circus, or I guess I should say I read most of The Night Circus. This is actually a DNF. There were a lot of things that I think were done really well and interestingly. I liked that there were a whole bunch of different stories and that the main character is kind of the circus itself rather than the human characters. The point of the story is to learn about the circus. And I thought that was really interesting and different. However, the human characters I didn't really care for very much, and I didn't really get enough of the magic system to be excited about it. I got about 400 pages in, maybe a little bit further, and it really was feeling like a chore to get through it, so I went ahead and DNF'd it. Like I said, there were some things about it that I really liked. It definitely has a very vibey kind of story, which I'm beginning to think is not really for me. So I was pretty disappointed with this one, especially because I had heard so many amazing things about The Night Circus. I'm really happy for everybody that loves it. I am just not one of those people. I think maybe if it had been a little bit shorter, then I would have liked it a little bit more. And there are certain character relationships and characters that I would have liked if they were a little bit different than what we got. But overall, I know this is a really beloved book. I believe a lot of people talk about this pretty positively. So this would be a good standalone if you're really into magical circusy vibes. You like a soft magic system. You don't need the rules of magic to be laid out exactly. It's got a hint of mystery and a really big cast of characters. So if you're into all those things, then maybe this one would be a good one for you. Next, I read Sweet and Bitter Magic. This is another young adult fantasy, and it follows two girls. It is a sapphic fantasy, and it follows these two girls whose names I cannot remember right now. Tamsin is one of them, and I don't remember the other one. But Tamsin is a witch. She does something at the beginning of the book that causes her to be exiled from the heart of the magic community, essentially. She gets kicked out, and she is stripped of her ability to love. To make her living, she provides spells and magic to the townsfolk where she now lives, and in exchange, she gets their love for certain things. So at the beginning of the book, we get her dealing with a woman, a mother, who's like, please heal my child. Tamsin is like, okay, but in exchange for that, you have to give me the love you have for your other child, the one that I'm not saving. And Tamsin is thinking this is a good deal, but the mother is really displeased and instead bargains away her love for her husband. And then Tamsin basically saves up that love and uses it to feel something positive sometimes. I really liked this concept, and I think the book was fine. I think it is a little bit better for a slightly younger audience, like it is a little bit younger YA. I didn't feel like the characters were 100% as developed as I would have liked, but I thought it was fine, a fun little adventure story, and definitely a quick read. Next, I read To Kill a Kingdom. So this is another young adult fantasy, and it is a retelling of The Little Mermaid, where the mermaid princess is actually a siren, and they're at war with the humans. So she murders humans all the time, but she's a princess, so she only goes for the high-class humans, as in she only murders princes. In turn, our prince main lead guy, whose name is not Prince Eric, but I always forget what his name actually is, he in turn hunts sirens to keep his country safe. And he also sails the seas. That's what he loves doing. Doesn't really like being home and being a prince. If you can't tell, we're gearing up for an enemies to lovers. I really enjoyed a lot of aspects of this book. I thought it was so fun. It's a great summer read. I feel like it has kind of like a dark summer sort of vibe because it's very beachy. They go to a lot of different places, which was one of the things I loved the most about this book. It had a lot of really cool areas that they go to, and you kind of get a sense of different countries and peoples, and that was something that I really loved. The main characters also felt really distinct. I liked the romance and I was rooting for them. There were certain aspects of it that don't vibe with my sense of romance exactly, but I still thought it was really fun and a really enjoyable read. I think it's really good for a reading slump because it's so fast-paced and fun and readable. That's definitely something that I would recommend this book for, is if you are stuck and you don't know what to read, then To Kill a Kingdom would be a great choice. This is not in order at all, but next on my list is An Enchantment of Ravens, which I only just read recently and I absolutely adored. I think this technically counts as a novella, but it is a standalone, and it is a beautiful story about a young lady who does portraits of fairies. The fairies come to her for her amazing portraiture skill, and one day the Prince of Autumn shows up and requests a portrait. And the main character has to be really careful because fairies are incredibly powerful, they're immortal, and they don't have human emotions. So they're not exactly going to be sympathetic if something goes wrong with their portrait. But the main girl is incredibly talented, so she doesn't really have to worry about that. And one day, she is working on this piece for the Prince of Autumn. This is after weeks and weeks of them working together, and she realizes what it's missing. There's a sorrow in his eyes, and she paints the sorrow into it, and before he sees it, he presents it to his court, and having the sorrow in his eyes is a problem. So she's going to be on trial for sabotaging him and his portrait. He shows up again in a fury, and he's like, "You're coming with me to the Autumn Court and you are in so much trouble." And so we kind of journey through fairylands from there, and that's what the story is. I really loved this. I especially loved the romance. I thought it was really fun and quick. Once again, very nice and readable. I loved the descriptions of all the autumnal things. It felt very grounded, very much like you were there. I also really loved the depiction of fairies. If you're into dark fae, this would definitely be one that I recommend. I really loved all of the descriptions of everything, and the characters were great. This is definitely one of my favorite standalones of the year. Next, we have Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, and I really don't know what to feel about this one. The pacing was very strange. I liked it, and I really liked the writing style of it in particular. And I liked the found family kind of characters that we traveled along with. This one is an adult fantasy, so it is a little bit of realm that I'm slightly less familiar, but I still really enjoyed it. It is a weird story. It definitely does not feel like a classic fantasy. It doesn't really feel like a modern fantasy either, because basically the plot is that the main girl, whose name is Mara. The main girl is Mara, and she is a princess. She's the third in line, and her oldest sister gets sent away to this big kingdom that they're kind of on the border of. She gets sent to this kingdom to be the prince's wife so that their tiny kingdom doesn't get wiped out by the bigger, scarier kingdom. And unfortunately, she dies pretty quickly. Everybody's confused. Mara doesn't really understand what happened. But then her second sister gets sent off, and Mara gets sent instead to a nunnery. Mara is really pleased about this because she is not very good around people or politics. She is kind of an odd one out in a lot of situations. She really just likes weaving, and so she is happy to be raised in a nunnery. She's not exactly a nun, but she's like nun adjacent. She finds out that her sister is being mistreated at the hands of this prince, and she's like, I'm gonna kill this prince. And so she's like, okay, I have to figure out how I'm going to kill this prince without everybody knowing that I did it and sabotaged them, because then we'll bring down the wrath of this bigger kingdom. So that's what her quest is about, a way to save her sister by killing the prince. Along the way, she meets a lot of interesting people. My favorite was the dust wife. She also makes friends with basically a godmother who has very certain specialties with the types of blessings that she can give to babies. So Nettle and Bone, I feel like, is really good for kind of fans of the fantasy, especially like fairy tale-esque sort of side of fantasy, because it kind of takes a lot of fairy tale tropes and either plays with them or turns them around in funny ways. It is definitely a funny book, but it also has like a really dark premise, as you could tell. Like I said, the sister is being mistreated, and she's being mistreated in kind of a somewhat horrific way. So keep that in mind. This book was very strange because it feels kind of like a satire, but it has a very dark-ish kind of premise. That said, the author doesn't linger on it in really graphic detail or anything like that. This does tend to be a more lighthearted sort of story. There's like a dog that's a skeleton that we have as a character. It's fun. It's meant to be fun, I think. And I enjoyed it a lot overall. Looking back on it, probably the weirdest thing I've read this year, but it was fun. So if you want something that's mostly lighthearted and you like sort of subversions or ways that people play with fairy tales, then I would recommend Nettle and Bone. And I will be checking out some of the other stories by this author because she does have a pretty great sense of humor that I really enjoyed. So if you're looking for a funny fantasy, then this is probably the one on this list that I would recommend for that. And then we come to what I think is possibly my favorite on this list, which is 1,000 Steps into Night by Traci Chee. I'm a fan of Traci Chee. I really loved her The Reader trilogy. So when I saw that she had a new YA fantasy out, I was so excited. And I was right to be excited because this book was awesome. It is kind of difficult to explain what it's about. Basically, the main girl gets kissed by a demon and she becomes cursed when that happens. And so she goes on a quest to prevent the curse from being fully realized. I don't want to get into too much exact description of what happens so that you can discover it along the way. But this was another really fun one. The characters were just really great. This is an adventure story overall, and it, again, feels very fairy tale-esque. It feels like the main girl is just going on like a series of smaller adventures that are kind of like short stories in this overall story about her trying to get to a certain place, which I recognize that's what chapters are. But what I mean specifically is that there are stories that are not directly like, this is actually related to the main story. This is more like a side diversion. And I really enjoyed that. I thought the pacing was really interesting. I loved the main character. I loved the writing style. As usual, Traci Chee is a brilliant writer, and I think she does a great job. It reminded me a lot of Spirited Away in a really fantastic way, because there are these spirits and demons and things like that that our main character has to deal with on her way to prevent this curse from coming true. There are just so many magical, wonderful elements. I loved the world. She befriends a lot of people on the way, but the main character that she befriends is my favorite. I love him so much. I can't remember his name right now, unfortunately. I can't really remember anybody's names this video, it seems like, but I absolutely loved him. He is a magpie demon. I think he counts as a demon. He's like a magpie spirit thing. And he is so much fun. This book is so great, and I don't see anybody talking about it, so definitely check it out if you want a whimsical, demonic good time. Then I read Mooncakes, which is a queer story about, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember this one that well, but it is a graphic novel, so I read through it really quickly, and basically it's about a young witch and a werewolf and their quest to stop an evil thing that's happening in their community. I really don't remember this one very well. Listen, the plot's not that important. The thing is that it was a cute story. It's fun. It has great representation. And if you want just a nice, fun little fantasy story to read through in like a day in a graphic novel, then that's what I recommend this for. It does have a plot. I just don't know what that plot is. But it was good and I enjoyed it. I just don't remember it well right now. If you've read it, please tell me what the plot is down below. So I meant to do this at the beginning of the video, but obviously I haven't, and you're going to see what I mean in a second. I meant to put all of my DNFs at like the beginning so that I could get that out of the way, and I did completely forget to do that. So now here they are, mostly at the end, except for the Night Circus, which I already talked about. So these last couple of books are ones that I did DNF. That doesn't mean that they're bad, though. It just means that they didn't work for me personally, and sometimes that's for a completely arbitrary reason. So the first one on this list is The Ghost Bride, and I was so excited to read this. And honestly, I might go back to it and give it another shot at some point, because there were some really interesting concepts that I really wanted to check out, and overall I was enjoying it. You may be wondering why I didn't finish it, and I was in a really weird mood, basically, and I didn't feel like, I think I fell into like a reading slump, and it wasn't really the book's fault. This one is very slow paced, and it is an adult fantasy, which, like I said, less experience there, but I do think it would have been a really good book, and I hope that I'm correct in including it on this list. It is now occurring to me that I don't know for sure that this is a standalone, but I'm pretty sure that it is. Basically, it's about this girl who is going to be a ghost bride, which means that she's going to be married to somebody who's already dead. And she gets involved in the spirit realm, and it's really interesting and really cool. It's like a historical fantasy, and there were a lot of things that I really loved about it. I was just in a really weird mood, and I borrowed it from the library, and the library asked for it back. And so I had to return it before I got a chance to finish it and had time to finish processing my weird mood. So I think this is one that I would definitely go back to because I still think about it sometimes and wonder how the story went. The writing was also really beautiful, and I really enjoyed the slow pacing. It was nice to have a book that you just really like settle into, and that's what this book felt like to me. I actually recommend this one. I think it sounds really interesting and cool, and I'm excited to pick it up again at a later date. Next were two middle grades. I'm starting to think that I am just not at an age where I enjoy middle grades very much anymore, because I haven't really picked up any that I've really loved in a while, which makes sense. It's not for me. But basically these two, the first one was Sweep by, I think, Jonathan Auxier? Something like that. And this was one that I had seen in a bookstore a really long time ago, and I wanted to pick it up, but I had a really specific budget, and there were other books that I wanted more, so I got those books. And then I saw this in the library, and I picked it up and started reading it. And it is about a chimney sweep girl in historical London. I think Victorian London. It is a bad time to be a chimney sweep, is what I'm trying to say. But there are these children, and they have to go up into the chimneys, and you hope you don't die by getting stuck in there and stuff like that. So this is for kids, but it is kind of a dark premise, definitely for kids who like a series of unfortunate events, that kind of thing. And there is a reference to the William Blake poems about chimney sweeps, which I thought was really interesting. It's divided into two parts, innocence and experience, which I thought was really promising. But I just wasn't really that interested in the way that the book was continuing. It's, like I said, it's about a chimney sweep girl, and she makes friends with like a soot monster type thing. But I found myself getting a little bit bored, and again, I think this is just an age thing. It's not for me, it's not for my age, but if you do have somebody who is a middle grade reader, I think this sounds really interesting and fun. There were a lot of really fun elements about it. I liked her little soot monster friend. I love the idea of a girl making friends with a monster. Like I said, it is a little bit darker, so keep that in mind, but that is sweet. And then the last one was The Spinner of Dreams. There were a lot of things that I liked about this one, but there were also a lot of things that just weren't really working for me, that were hard for me to picture. It's set in a magical world where everything is decided by the spinner of fate and the spinner of dreams. And it follows a girl who has been like cursed by the spinner of fate. So she has one hand that's like much larger than the other hand, and it's like her evil hand, her bad hand, and it does bad things. She like loses control of it, and it will like set somebody on fire. That's what the bad hand does. It does bad things. It breaks your favorite vase, that sort of thing. So she hates her bad hand, and she wants to get it fixed, essentially figure out what's wrong with her and fix it. Because of this, she has really extreme anxiety, and also everybody hates her. And by everybody, I mean everybody except for family. She's beloved by her parents, which was something that I thought was so nice, because a lot of times that does not happen in middle grade stories or young adult stories. She has like this beautiful relationship with her parents, and I thought that was so cute and so sweet. But she can't really accept their love because she's so torn up about her cursed hand and the way that everybody in the village hates their entire family, because on the day that she was born, bad stuff happened, and then every time she's around, more bad stuff happens. It's not just her hand either. It's just like the curse follows her and causes problems. And so everybody in the village hates her and lives in fear of her, and because of that, they mistreat her parents. So she feels really guilty and anxious all of the time. So, like I said, there were a lot of things that I thought were really cute and cool, but I didn't really like the pacing very much for me. And I just found that I wasn't all that interested in continuing and finding out what happened, so I went ahead and DNF'd it. That said, I thought it had a lot of really interesting things. Like, I love that she has anxiety. Having a young protagonist who has anxiety and is still very capable and strong and like wants to do this, I thought that was very cool. And so I think it would, again, be a good story for a young reader. And that finally is the end of my list of all the standalone fantasies that I read this year. I have really enjoyed trying to read more standalones rather than fantasies, and I'm looking for more recommendations for next year. So if you have a standalone fantasy that you really enjoyed, please let me know what it is so that I can check it out. I hope you got some good books from my list. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and have a great night, universe.